Just another spoiled brat with an attitude problem. The words echoed through the National Weather Center as Maya stared at her suspension notice. They had no idea that the quiet girl they just silenced was the only one who could see what was coming. A Category 5 monster racing toward 500,000 unsuspecting souls. And she had less than 18 hours to save them all. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed. Because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. The morning sun painted the Colorado National Weather Center in golden hues, its modern glass facade reflecting a perfect September sky, not a cloud in sight. The kind of day that made meteorologists yawn and reach for their third cup of coffee. Maya Volkov pushed through the revolving doors at exactly 7:47 a.m., her worn messenger bag slung across her shoulder, dark hair still damp from her morning run. At 19, Maya carried herself with a quiet intensity that made people uncomfortable. Her pale green eyes seemed to catalog everything: the pressure readings on distant monitors, the subtle shift in air conditioning patterns, the way seasoned forecasters moved with practiced boredom through another routine morning. She'd been in the National Weather Service's elite internship program for exactly 3 weeks, and already whispers followed her through the corridors. "There's something off about that girl," murmured Dr. Patricia Hensley, the center's assistant director, as Maya passed the main forecasting floor. "She questions everything. Acts like she knows better than people with 20 years of experience." Maya's sharp ears caught every word, but her expression remained neutral. She'd learned long ago that defending yourself only made things worse. Instead, she settled at her assigned workstation in the back corner, the intern ghetto, as the other trainees called it, and began her daily ritual of checking atmospheric data that most people ignored. The European Center for Medium-Range Weather forecasts. The Global Forecast System. Satellite imagery from 3 different orbital platforms. While her fellow interns gossiped about weekend plans or complained about the tedium of data entry, Maya dove into the numbers like an archaeologist searching for hidden treasures in ancient soil. Her fingers flew across multiple keyboards, pulling up wind shear data, sea surface temperatures, and upper-level divergence patterns. To most observers, she looked like any other eager intern trying too hard to impress. They had no idea she was running calculations in her head that would have required supercomputers for most meteorologists. "Volkov!" The sharp voice of Dr. Marcus Webb, the center's chief meteorologist, cut through the morning calm. "My office. Now." Heads turned throughout the forecasting floor. Dr. Webb was notorious for his volcanic temper and his particular disdain for interns who, in his words, thought they were smarter than the computer models. Maya saved her work data showing an unusual temperature gradient developing over the Gulf of Mexico, and walked calmly toward the glass-walled office that overlooked the entire operation. Dr. Webb sat behind his massive desk, her internship file spread before him like evidence in a criminal trial. His gray hair was perfectly combed, his tie precisely knotted, everything about him screaming institutional authority. Behind him, 3 large monitors displayed the morning's forecast maps, high-pressure systems, gentle winds, and clear skies, as far as the models could predict. "Sit down, Miss Volkov," he said without looking up. "We need to talk about your attitude." Maya remained standing. "My attitude, sir? Yesterday, you questioned Senior Meteorologist Johnson's 5-day forecast in front of the entire staff." His pale blue eyes finally met hers, cold and disapproving. "The week before, you submitted an unauthorized report suggesting our hurricane tracking algorithms were missing critical data points. And don't get me started on your constant requests for access to European weather models that are far beyond your clearance level. I was offering observations based on. You were undermining seasoned professionals." Webb's voice rose slightly. "This isn't some college classroom where you can play devil's advocate. This is the National Weather Service. Lives depend on our accuracy, and accuracy comes from following established protocols, not from some teenager's wild theories. Maya's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. With respect, sir, my concerns about the Atlantic Basin temperature anomalies weren't theories. The data clearly shows. The data shows exactly what our models say it shows. Webb stood his full height meant to intimidate. Perfect weather for the next 7 days. No significant storm activity. No hurricane threats. Case closed. Through the office windows, Maya could see the morning sun climbing higher, painting everything in deceptively peaceful light. Somewhere out there, beyond the reach of their instruments, beyond the scope of their models, she felt something stirring. A whisper in the atmospheric data that no one else seemed to hear. Am I being dismissed from the program? She asked quietly. Webb's smile was cold. You're being given a chance to adjust your attitude. Take the rest of the week off. Think about whether you want to be part of this team or continue playing amateur meteorologist. When you come back Monday, I expect a very different approach. Maya nodded once, gathered her things, and walked out of the office with the same quiet composure she'd entered with. Behind her, she could hear Dr. Webb already on the phone, probably reporting to Dr. Hensley about the difficult intern, who'd been appropriately handled. As she pushed through the revolving doors, back into the perfect September morning, Maya pulled out her phone and began making calls. Not to complain or appeal the decision, but to access weather data through channels her supervisors didn't even know existed. Because while they saw only sunshine and clear skies, Maya Volkov saw the early whispers of something that would soon make Hurricane Katrina look like a gentle summer shower. The Colorado Weather Center's break room buzzed with the kind of gossip that spreads through government buildings like wildfire. Maya's suspension had become the morning's entertainment, served alongside stale coffee and yesterday's donuts. Did you see her face when Webb called her in? Laughed Jennifer Chun, a senior forecaster with 15 years of experience and a reputation for office politics. Girl actually thought she could waltz in here and rewrite meteorology. These young kids watch a few storm documentaries and think they're hurricane experts. Brad Morrison, the center's lead hurricane specialist, leaned back in his chair with practiced authority. At 42, he'd built his career on being right more often than wrong, and his ego had grown proportionally with each successful forecast. His father had been a legendary storm tracker in the 1980s, and Brad wore that legacy like a badge of honor. The problem with kids today, Brad announced to the gathered group, is they don't understand that weather forecasting is about patience, experience, and respecting the science. Not about fancy European models or amateur hour theories. Through the break room windows, the September sky remained flawlessly blue, reinforcing everything Brad had just said. The morning forecast models showed nothing but high pressure and clear sailing for the next week. Hurricane season was winding down, and everyone was already thinking about fall vacations and weekend football games. What exactly did she question about Johnson's forecast? Asked Dr. Sarah Martinez, one of the few voices in the room that sounded genuinely curious rather than dismissive. Jennifer rolled her eyes. She kept insisting there were temperature anomalies in the Gulf that our models weren't accounting for. Kept pulling up satellite data from European sources and acting like she'd discovered some major flaw in our system. European sources? Brad's voice sharpened. Those models are academic curiosities at best. We use American technology here, proven technology that's protected American lives for decades. The girl clearly doesn't understand the difference between playing with computers and actual operational meteorology. What none of them knew was that Maya had grown up in Prague, the daughter of Dr. Ilana Volkova, one of Europe's most respected severe weather researchers. While American kids were playing video games, Maya had been analyzing pressure gradients. While her peers were worried about homework, She'd been studying historical hurricane data dating back to the 1850s. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. And while most teenagers rebelled against their parents' careers, Maya had embraced her mother's work with an almost frightening intensity. But Maya's suspension letter had specifically forbidden her from accessing center systems, and her colleagues had made it clear that her European perspective wasn't welcome anyway. So she kept that background to herself, even as her phone buzzed with text messages from research contacts across 3 continents. The first message came from Dr. Hans Mueller in Hamburg. Maya seeing unusual pressure readings in Atlantic Basin. Your thoughts? The second, from Dr. Claire Dubuya in Toulouse. Storm development patterns not matching standard models. Needs second opinion. And the third, from her mother in Prague. Satellite thermal imaging shows concerning developments. Are your colleagues tracking this? Maya stepped outside into the perfect Colorado morning and began making calls. Her first was to the National Hurricane Center in Miami, where she'd spent the previous summer working with Dr. James Restrepo, one of the few American meteorologists who respected European research. Jim, it's Maya Volkov. I need you to look at something. Dr. Restrepo's familiar voice carried a note of concern. Maya? Aren't you at the Colorado Center? What's going on? I've been suspended for questioning forecasts. But Jim, there's something developing that I think everyone's missing. The Gulf Stream temperatures are showing anomalies that suggest slow down. Suspended? What kind of anomalies? Maya pulled up data on her phone, numbers she'd memorized from her morning analysis. Surface temperatures are running 3.2 degrees above normal in a specific corridor from the Yucatan to the Florida Straits. Upper-level wind patterns show decreasing shear over the next 72 hours. And the European ensemble models are all showing rapid intensification potential in the southwestern Atlantic. There was a long pause. Maya, our models aren't showing anything like that. Everything looks quiet for the next 7 to 10 days. That's because your models aren't weighing the thermal patterns correctly. Jim, what if I sent you my analysis? Would you at least look at it? Another pause, longer this time. Off the record? Off the record. Meanwhile, back inside the weather center, Brad Morrison was holding court in the main forecasting room, using Maya's suspension as a teaching moment. For the other interns. This is why we follow protocols, he announced, gesturing toward the wall of monitors showing peaceful weather maps. Weather forecasting isn't about gut feelings or theoretical models. It's about proven science, institutional knowledge, and understanding that Mother Nature doesn't care about your college GPA. The assembled interns nodded dutifully, though a few cast uncertain glances toward Maya's empty workstation, where multiple screens still displayed the European data she'd been analyzing. But what if she was seeing something we missed? Asked Kevin Park, a shy intern from UC Boulder, who'd always been intimidated by Maya's confidence. Brad's laugh was condescending. Kid, I've been tracking storms since before that girl was born. My father taught me to read weather patterns when most people were still trusting the Farmer's Almanac. Trust me, if there was something out there worth tracking, we'd know about it. Dr. Hensley appeared in the doorway, having heard the last part of the conversation. Mr. Morrison is absolutely right. Our models are the most sophisticated in the world, and our team has decades of combined experience. One overconfident intern questioning our methods doesn't suddenly invalidate everything we've built here. But even as she spoke, Dr. Hensley felt a small nagging doubt. Maya's questions hadn't been random or emotional. They'd been specific, technical, and unfortunately, difficult to dismiss entirely. The girl had asked about things that most interns wouldn't even know to look for. Outside, Maya finished her call with Dr. Restrepo and immediately dialed her mother in Prague. "Mom, I need you to run a full atmospheric analysis using the European Center's newest models. Focus on Atlantic Basin thermodynamics and upper-level wind shear projections for the next 96 hours." Her mother's accented English carried both affection and concern. "Maya, darling, what's happening? You sound stressed." "I've been suspended from the internship for asking too many questions." "But Mom, I think something big is developing and nobody here is seeing it. If I'm wrong, I'll apologize and learn to keep my mouth shut. But if I'm right, if you're right, 500,000 people are about to be in very serious danger." Maya looked up at the cloudless Colorado sky, then checked her phone for the latest satellite imagery from the Atlantic. Somewhere out there, in the warm waters between Africa and America, something was stirring. Something that would soon make every meteorologist in the country remember her name. But first, she had to prove that the quiet girl with the attitude problem was the only one who could see the storm coming. Maya's suspension should have been a humiliation. Instead, it became the most productive day of her career. While her former colleagues enjoyed their coffee and congratulated themselves on maintaining institutional order, Maya sat in her cramped Denver apartment, surrounded by 3 laptops, 2 tablets, and enough weather data to choke a supercomputer. Her living room had been transformed into a makeshift command center, with satellite feeds streaming live from European space. Agency sources her mother had quietly provided access to. The beauty of being dismissed from the National Weather Center was that nobody was monitoring her activities anymore. Dr. Webb had assumed that cutting off her official access would silence her questions. Instead, it had freed her to use resources that made the center's equipment look like pocket calculators. Her phone rang every 20 minutes. Dr. Mueller from Hamburg, reporting unusual wind patterns over the Sahara. Dr. Restrepo from Miami, increasingly concerned about the thermal readings Maya had shared. Dr. Chun from Taiwan, tracking unusual jet stream behaviors that seemed connected to Atlantic Basin developments. By noon, Maya had compiled an analysis that would have taken the National Weather Center's entire staff 3 days to produce. And what she found made her hands shake as she typed. The atmospheric conditions weren't just unusual, they were historic. A perfect storm of factors was aligning in ways that occurred maybe once every 50 years. Sea surface temperatures in a specific corridor had reached levels that could fuel explosive intensification. Upper-level wind patterns were shifting in ways that would remove the atmospheric caps that normally prevented storm development. And most terrifyingly, the steering currents were setting up to drive any developing system directly toward the most populated coastline in America. At the National Weather Center, Dr. Webb was having a surprisingly good day. The morning forecast models continued to show perfect weather, validating his decision to suspend the troublemaking intern. The afternoon shift had arrived without any unusual developments, and several colleagues had privately congratulated him on handling the Maya situation with appropriate firmness. "Sometimes you have to make the hard decisions," he told Dr. Hensley during their weekly status meeting. That girl was becoming disruptive to team morale. "We can't have interns thinking they can second-guess senior meteorologists every time they disagree with a forecast." Dr. Hensley nodded, though something nagged at her. "Marcus, did you actually review her analysis before dismissing it? I mean, just to be thorough?" Webb's expression hardened slightly. "Patricia, our models are the gold standard for weather prediction. We don't need some European-trained teenager telling us how to read American weather systems." End of discussion. But Dr. Hensley had built her career on asking uncomfortable questions, and Maya's specific technical concerns kept echoing in her mind. After the meeting, she quietly accessed the girl's recent data requests and found something that made her pause. Maya hadn't been randomly questioning forecasts. She'd been systematically tracking specific atmospheric indicators that weren't part of the center's standard monitoring protocols. temperature gradients that required multiple satellite sources to detect, wind shear measurements that combined European and American data in ways their models didn't account for, upper-level divergence patterns that suggested ... Dr. Hensley's phone buzzed with a text message from an unknown number. "Dr. Hensley, this is Maya Volkov. I know I'm suspended, but I have analysis you need to see. Not to prove a point, but because lives may depend on it. Could we meet? MV." She stared at the message for several minutes. Protocol demanded she ignore it, report it to Dr. Webb, and maintain the institutional hierarchy that kept the center functioning smoothly. But something in the message's tone, urgent but not desperate, confident but not arrogant, made her hesitate. Meanwhile, Maya continued building her case. European models were now showing consistent signals of rapid atmospheric change. 3 different satellite thermal analysis systems were detecting the same anomalous heating patterns. And most concerning, historical data showed that the last time similar conditions had aligned. The result had been Hurricane Camille in 1969, one of the most destructive storms in American history. Her phone rang again, this time from an unknown Colorado number. "Maya, this is Dr. Patricia Hensley from the Weather Center. I got your message." Maya's pulse quickened. "Dr. Hensley, thank you for calling. I know this is highly irregular, but can you meet me at the University of Colorado Meteorology Lab? In 1 hour, unofficially. Of course. Of course, Dr. Hensley, when you see what I found, you'll understand why I couldn't let this go." After hanging up, Maya began preparing a presentation that would either vindicate her concerns or end her meteorological career before it truly began. She gathered satellite imagery, thermal analysis, historical comparison data, and projected storm tracks that painted a picture no one wanted to see. At the National Weather Center, the afternoon forecast team was wrapping up their shift with the same confidence they'd started with. Clear skies, gentle winds, and no significant weather concerns for the foreseeable future. Brad Morrison signed off on the 5-day forecast with particular satisfaction, knowing that his expertise had been validated while that arrogant intern learned her place, but 50 miles away. In a university lab where the walls were covered with hurricane tracking charts from decades past, Maya Volkov was about to show a senior meteorologist evidence that would keep her awake for the next 72 hours. Because while everyone else saw perfect weather, Maya had found the fingerprints of what would soon become the most dangerous hurricane in a generation. And she had less than 48 hours to convince people who'd already decided she was wrong. The storm was coming, whether they believed her or not. The University of Colorado's Atmospheric Sciences lab smelled like old coffee and decades of academic ambition. Dr. Hensley arrived first, her hands trembling slightly as she unlocked the building after hours. She'd built a 30-year career on following protocols, respecting hierarchy, and trusting institutional wisdom. Meeting a suspended intern in an unofficial capacity violated everything she'd been taught about professional conduct, but Maya's message had carried something that bureaucratic training couldn't ignore. The quiet certainty of someone who'd seen something terrible approaching. Maya entered the lab carrying a weathered leather satchel that had belonged to her mother, filled with notebooks, hard drives, and printed satellite imagery that most meteorologists would need weeks to analyze. As she spread her materials across the conference table, Dr. Hensley noticed something that made her pause. Maya's movements weren't those of an eager intern trying to impress a superior. They were precise, methodical, almost ritualistic. Actions of someone who'd done this countless times before, under far more serious circumstances. "Dr. Hensley, before I show you what I found, I need to tell you something about why I see patterns that others miss." Maya pulled out a photograph. A young girl, maybe 8 years old, standing beside a tall woman in front of a massive radar installation. Both were serious expressions, and behind them, satellite dishes reached toward storm clouds that filled the horizon. "That's me and my mother," Dr. Elena Volkova, at the European Center for Medium-Range Weather Forecasts in Reading, England. I was 8. Hurricane Francis was bearing down on the Azores, and my mother was leading the international coordination effort. Dr. Hensley leaned forward, studying the photograph more carefully. She recognized the installation, now one of the most sophisticated weather monitoring facilities in the world. While other kids were playing with toys, I was learning to read pressure gradients. While they watched cartoons, I studied satellite thermal imagery. My mother didn't choose to train me this way, circumstances forced it. Maya opened one of her notebooks, revealing pages of handwritten calculations, pressure maps, and wind vector analyses that would have challenged graduate-level meteorology students. The work was dated from when she was 12 years old. My mother's philosophy shaped everything I understand about severe weather prediction. She taught me that storms aren't just meteorological events. They're puzzles written in atmospheric language that most people never learn to read fluently. She turned to a page filled with what looked like poetry, but Dr. Hensley recognized it as sophisticated atmospheric equations written in a flowing, almost artistic hand. "Listen to what the atmosphere whispers before it screams," Maya quoted, her mother's words carrying a faint Prague accent. "The deadliest storms announce themselves in ways that conventional models cannot hear. Temperature tells truth. Pressure reveals secrets. And wind patterns show the future to those who know the language." Dr. Hensley felt a chill that had nothing to do with the lab's air conditioning. "Maya, what exactly did your mother train you to see?" "Atmospheric signatures that don't show up in standard models. Thermal fingerprints that indicate rapid intensification potential. Wind shear patterns that suggest explosive development." Maya's voice carried the quiet confidence of someone who'd been tested under extreme conditions. "Dr. Hensley, most meteorologists learn to forecast weather. My mother taught me to think like weather." She opened her laptop and displayed a real-time satellite feed that showed the Atlantic Basin in extraordinary detail. To Dr. Hensley's eyes, it looked like a typical late September view: scattered clouds, gentle wind patterns, nothing alarming. "What do you see?" Maya asked. "Normal atmospheric conditions. Maybe some mid-level moisture, but nothing concerning." Maya's fingers flew across the keyboard, overlaying thermal analysis, wind vector data, and pressure readings that transformed the innocent-looking satellite image into something far more ominous. "Look at the thermal signature here." She pointed to an area that now glowed red on the enhanced display. "Sea surface temperatures running 3.4 degrees above normal in a corridor that historical data shows has produced 6 Category 5 hurricanes since 1950. The image shifted again, showing upper-level wind patterns that seem to pulse and flow like a living organism. These wind shear measurements indicate that the atmospheric cap that's been suppressing development is about to lift. When it does, any low-pressure system in this region will have unlimited potential for intensification. Dr. Hensley watched, mesmerized, as Maya continued building her case layer by layer, each piece of data more compelling than the last. "But the most concerning element is this." Maya highlighted a subtle swirling pattern that was barely visible, even with enhancement. "This is the early signature of what my mother calls thermal entrainment, a feedback loop where rising sea temperatures create atmospheric conditions that cause even more dramatic heating." I've never heard of thermal entrainment. Most American meteorologists haven't. It was identified by European researchers studying Mediterranean storm development, but the principles apply to any warm water basin. Dr. Hensley, when thermal entrainment begins, normal intensity forecasting becomes almost useless. Maya pulled up historical comparison data that made Dr. Hensley's breath catch. Hurricane Camille, 1969. Hurricane Gilbert, 1988. Hurricane Mitch, 1998. Each had shown the same atmospheric fingerprints that Maya was tracking in real time. My mother taught me that the atmosphere keeps secrets, but it always tells the truth eventually. The secret it's keeping right now is that we're about to see explosive storm development in conditions that our standard models will grossly underestimate. Dr. Hensley stared at the data, her institutional training warring with what her eyes were clearly seeing. Maya, if you're right about this, why aren't our models picking it up? Maya's smile was sad but understanding. Because your models are designed to predict normal weather events. What's developing isn't normal. It's the kind of perfect storm that occurs maybe twice in a generation, and when it happens, conventional forecasting fails catastrophically. She closed the laptop and met Dr. Hensley's eyes directly. Dr. Hensley, in 18 hours, atmospheric conditions are going to align in ways that will turn a minor tropical disturbance into a Category 5 hurricane in less than 24 hours. And based on current steering patterns, it's headed directly for the Gulf Coast. 18 hours? Maya, our models show nothing but clear weather for your models are wrong. The quiet certainty in Maya's voice was more terrifying than any shouting could have been. And by the time they catch up to reality, it will be too late to save the 500,000 people who are about to be in its path. Dr. Hensley realized she was holding her breath. Either this suspended intern was brilliantly insane, or she was about to witness the greatest meteorological disaster in modern American history. Maya's hands trembled slightly as she opened the final section of her mother's journal, pages she'd never shown to anyone. Dr. Hensley noticed the change in her demeanor. The confident young meteorologist suddenly looked fragile, haunted by memories that weather data couldn't quantify. Dr. Hensley, there's something else you need to understand. Something that explains why I can't let this go, even when everyone thinks I'm wrong. The journal entry was dated September 23, 2019. Maya would have been 15. Hurricane Lorenzo was supposed to be weakening as it approached the Azores. Every model, American and European, predicted it would lose intensity and pass harmlessly through the islands as a minimal storm. Maya's voice grew quiet, the way people speak when reliving their worst nightmares. My mother was leading the European response team, coordinating evacuation recommendations with Portuguese authorities. The official forecast called for Category 1 winds at worst. Islanders were told to secure loose objects and wait it out. Dr. Hensley watched Maya's face as she continued, seeing the weight of inherited trauma that shaped every weather analysis she made. I was with my mother at the Emergency Coordination Center in Lisbon when the reports started coming in. Wind measurements that made no sense. Pressure readings that broke historical records. Lorenzo hadn't weakened. It had intensified beyond anything the models predicted. Maya pulled up archived satellite imagery on her laptop, showing a monstrous storm that dwarfed the surrounding islands. In 12 hours, Lorenzo went from a Category 1 hurricane to a Category 5 monster with winds exceeding 170 miles per hour. The thermal entrainment process I showed you earlier, it happened in real time, and nobody saw it coming. The images were devastating. Storm surge that reached 20 feet above normal high tide. Winds that reduced concrete buildings to rubble. An entire fishing fleet vanished in waters that were supposed to be manageable. 47 people died that night. Dr. Hensley, 47 souls who trusted the forecasts, who believed the models, who went to sleep thinking they were safe. Maya's voice cracked slightly. And every one of those deaths was preventable if someone had been monitoring the right atmospheric indicators. Dr. Hensley felt sick. She remembered Hurricane Lorenzo, remembered the shocked international response. When a minor hurricane had caused catastrophic damage, the meteorological community had spent months trying to understand what had gone wrong. My mother never forgave herself. She had access to European thermal analysis that showed early signs of rapid intensification, but she trusted the consensus forecast instead of her own instincts. She retired 6 months later. Maya turned to a photograph tucked inside the journals. Back cover. A cemetery on a windswept island, with 47 small white crosses facing the Atlantic Ocean. Every one of these graves represents someone who died, because meteorologists chose institutional harmony over atmospheric truth. Dr. Hensley, that's why I can't stay quiet when I see the same patterns developing again. Maya, you said your mother retired, but you're here, studying American weather systems. Why? Maya's laugh was bitter. Because Hurricane Lorenzo taught us something that changed everything. The thermal entrainment process isn't limited to Mediterranean systems. It can happen anywhere warm water meets specific atmospheric conditions. And based on historical analysis, the Gulf of Mexico is the most likely place for it to occur catastrophically. She pulled up a map showing ocean temperature patterns across the Atlantic basin, with the Gulf of Mexico highlighted in ominous red. After Lorenzo, my mother spent 2 years developing new detection algorithms specifically designed to identify rapid intensification potential. She sent me here to learn American forecasting methods and, if necessary, to warn American meteorologists about patterns they weren't trained to recognize. Dr. Hensley stared at the thermal map, understanding finally dawning. You're not just a suspended intern. You're here on a mission. I'm here because my mother couldn't save 47 people in the Azores, but maybe I can save 500,000 people in America. Maya's green eyes held fierce determination mixed with inherited guilt. Dr. Hensley, what I'm seeing right now in the Gulf is identical to what we missed before Lorenzo intensified. The thermal signatures, the wind shear patterns, the upper level divergence, it's all there. Maya opened her laptop to show real-time satellite feeds that now carried new meaning for Dr. Hensley. Every data point represented not just meteorological information, but the ghosts of people who died when forecasters chose comfort over courage. The difference is, this time we have 18 hours warning instead of 12. This time we know what to look for. This time we can choose to act on the evidence instead of trusting models that aren't designed to detect rapid intensification. Dr. Hensley felt the weight of responsibility settling on her shoulders like a lead blanket. Maya, if you're right, if a Category 5 hurricane really is about to develop in the Gulf, why aren't you talking to the National Hurricane Center instead of a local weather office? Maya's smile was grim. Because the National Hurricane Center uses the same models, the same assumptions, the same institutional thinking that killed 47 people in the Azores. Dr. Hensley, you're the highest-ranking meteorologist who's been willing to listen to evidence that contradicts conventional wisdom. She closed the journal and met Dr. Hensley's eyes directly. My mother taught me that atmospheric truth doesn't care about professional reputations or institutional hierarchies. When Lorenzo hit, the wind didn't check anyone's credentials before. It started killing people. Dr. Hensley understood now why Maya had seemed so different from other interns, why her questions had carried such urgency, why her suspension had felt wrong from the beginning. This wasn't a rebellious teenager challenging authority for attention. This was someone carrying the weight of preventable tragedy, determined not to let it happen again. What do you need me to do? Maya opened her phone and showed Dr. Hensley a contact list that included meteorologists from 15 countries, emergency management officials, and direct lines to European weather monitoring systems. I need you to help me convince people who have the power to issue evacuation orders. Because in 18 hours, when atmospheric conditions align and thermal entrainment begins, we're going to watch a minor tropical disturbance become the deadliest hurricane in American history. And if we're wrong? Maya looked toward the window, where the Colorado evening sky remained perfectly clear and peaceful. If we're wrong, I'll apologize to everyone, accept that my career is over, and live with the consequences. But Dr. Hensley, if we're right and we do nothing, she gestured toward the photograph of 47 graves, then we become responsible for every person who dies because we chose silence over truth. Dr. Hensley realized she was at a crossroads that would define the rest of her life. Trust the system that had shaped her entire career, or trust a 19-year-old girl who carried the weight of atmospheric prophecy in her eyes. Outside, the first wind gust of the evening rustled the trees, and somewhere in the Gulf of Mexico, water temperatures rose another degree. By 6 p.m. Mountain Time, word of Maya's meeting with Dr. Hensley had reached the National Weather Center through channels that moved faster than storm systems. Dr. Marcus Webb sat in his office, staring at a formal complaint he was drafting about unauthorized contact with suspended personnel, while Brad Morrison paced behind him like a caged predator. "This is exactly what I warned you about," Brad said, his voice tight with barely controlled anger. "Give these kids an inch of authority, and they think they can circumvent the entire professional hierarchy. Now she's feeding conspiracy theories to senior staff." Dr. Webb's phone buzzed with a text from Dr. Hensley. "Marcus, we need to talk. Maya Volkov has shown the analysis that requires immediate attention." Webb showed the message to Brad, whose face reddened with indignation. "Unbelievable. She's actually convinced Patricia to take her seriously. Marcus, this has gone way beyond a simple disciplinary issue. This girl is actively undermining our institutional credibility." What neither man knew was that Maya's undermining had expanded far beyond their control. Her international network of meteorological contacts had been analyzing American atmospheric data for the past 6 hours, and their conclusions were starting to converge in ways that made seasoned storm trackers nervous. Dr. James Restrepo from the National Hurricane Center had quietly begun running enhanced thermal models based on Maya's recommendations. Dr. Mueller in Hamburg was tracking upper-level wind patterns that showed disturbing similarities to pre-Lorenzo conditions. And Maya's mother, Dr. Lena Volkova, had begun calling emergency contacts throughout the European meteorological community. But at the National Weather Center, institutional authority was preparing to assert itself decisively. Dr. Webb called an emergency staff meeting for 7 p.m., ostensibly to discuss protocol violations and their impact on operational integrity. What he really wanted was to publicly discredit Maya's analysis before it gained any more traction among his senior staff. The main conference room, filled with meteorologists who'd spent their entire careers trusting American models and American institutional wisdom. Dr. Hensley arrived last, carrying printouts of Maya's thermal analysis and looking like someone who'd seen disturbing evidence she couldn't ignore. "Ladies and gentlemen," Dr. Webb began, his voice carrying the authority of 30 years in weather forecasting, "we're here to address a situation that threatens the scientific credibility of this institution." He clicked to the first slide of his presentation, Institutional Protocol and the Dangers of Amateur Forecasting. This afternoon, a suspended intern managed to convince Dr. Hensley to meet with her unofficially, sharing what she calls critical analysis of atmospheric conditions that supposedly indicate major storm development. Murmurs rippled through the room. Several meteorologists glanced at Dr. Hensley, who maintained carefully neutral expression. "I want to be clear," Webb continued, "that entertaining such unauthorized input undermines everything we've built here. Our models are the gold standard for American weather prediction. Our methods have saved countless lives, and our institutional expertise cannot be challenged by every intern who thinks she's discovered something we've missed." Brad Morrison stood up, playing his part perfectly. "Dr. Webb, I've been tracking Atlantic Basin conditions all week. Current models show absolutely no indication of significant storm development. Surface temperatures are within normal ranges, wind shear is adequate to suppress tropical activity, and steering patterns indicate continued stable conditions." He clicked to a slide showing pristine weather maps stretching 7 days into the future. "The idea that some catastrophic hurricane is about to develop contradicts every reliable forecasting tool we possess." Dr. Hensley cleared her throat. "Brad, Have you reviewed the European thermal analysis that Maya provided? Because the temperature gradients she's tracking, European models are academic curiosities. Brad interrupted, his voice sharp with professional disdain. We use operational American technology here, proven systems that have protected American lives for decades. I'm not going to second-guess 30 years of institutional knowledge because some teenager claims to see patterns in foreign data. Webb nodded approvingly. Exactly. The problem with entertaining these amateur theories is that they erode confidence in established protocols. If we start questioning our models every time someone with a laptop thinks they found something new, we undermine the entire foundation of operational meteorology. But Dr. Hensley had spent her afternoon looking at evidence that was difficult to dismiss entirely. Marcus, what if we're wrong? What if there really is something developing that our standard models aren't detecting? The question hung in the air like smoke from a distant fire. Brad's laugh was condescending. Patricia, with all due respect, you're letting an intern's dramatic presentation cloud your professional judgment. Show me just one operational American model that indicates significant storm development in the next week. He clicked through multiple forecast displays, each showing peaceful conditions extending well into October. These aren't opinions or theories. These are mathematical predictions based on actual atmospheric data processed by supercomputers, using algorithms that have been refined over decades. Webb seized the moment. This is precisely why we have institutional protocols. Weather forecasting isn't about individual intuition or foreign speculation. It's about proven science, reliable technology, and the kind of professional expertise that comes from years of operational experience. Around the room, heads nodded in agreement. The institutional consensus was reasserting itself, drowning out the uncomfortable questions that Maya's analysis had raised. I'm recommending that we file a formal complaint about unauthorized contact with suspended personnel, Webb announced. And I want it clearly understood that any further meetings with Maya Volkov will be considered insubordination. Dr. Hensley felt the weight of institutional pressure settling around her like a straitjacket. Everything in her professional training demanded that she accept the consensus, trust the models, and respect the hierarchy that had shaped her entire career. But she couldn't forget the satellite imagery Maya had shown her, or the historical comparisons that painted such a disturbing picture, or the photograph of 47 graves in the Azores. Marcus, I understand your concerns about protocol. But what if we established a formal review process? What if we brought in additional expertise to evaluate? No. Webb's voice cut through her suggestion like a blade. We are not going to legitimize amateur forecasting by creating special review processes. Our models are reliable, our expertise is proven, and our institutional methods have protected American lives for generations. Brad added the final blow. Patricia, I know Maya's presentation was compelling, but emotional appeals aren't meteorology. Scientific evidence isn't about who tells the most dramatic story. It's about mathematical models, verified data, and professional expertise. As the meeting dispersed, Dr. Hensley walked to the parking lot feeling like she carried the weight of atmospheric prophecy in her briefcase. Maya's analysis remained as compelling as ever, but institutional reality had made it clear that pursuing it further would end her career. Meanwhile, 50 miles away, Maya sat in her apartment watching real-time satellite feeds that showed subtle but unmistakable signs of atmospheric organization beginning in the Gulf of Mexico. The first wisps of circulation were starting to appear exactly where her models had predicted they would dot in 18 hours. Either her career would be over, or 500,000 people would wish they'd listened to the girl with the attitude problem. September 24th, 3:47 a.m. Gulf Standard Time. Maya hadn't slept. She sat in her Denver apartment, surrounded by the soft glow of multiple monitors, watching atmospheric data stream in from satellites. weather buoys, and research stations across 3 continents. What she saw made her stomach clench with sick recognition. The first tropical disturbance of what would become Hurricane Cassandra had formed exactly where her models predicted, at exactly the time her calculations had indicated. A small, seemingly innocent swirl of clouds, 600 miles southeast of New Orleans, spinning slowly in the warm Gulf waters like a sleeping giant, beginning to stir. To most meteorologists scanning the morning data, it looked unremarkable, just another minor tropical depression that would probably fizzle out before reaching land. Surface winds barely reached 35 miles per hour. Central pressure was a relatively high 1,005 millibars. By every conventional measure, it was a minor weather event hardly worth monitoring. But Maya could see what others couldn't. The thermal signature beneath the storm showed water temperatures of 86.3 degrees Fahrenheit, hot enough to fuel explosive intensification. Upper-level wind patterns showed the atmospheric cap that normally prevented rapid development was dissolving faster than her most aggressive models had predicted. And most ominously, the steering currents were strengthening, creating a highway that would drive any developing storm directly toward the Louisiana coast. Her phone buzzed with messages from her international network, Dr. Mueller in Hamburg. Maya, European models now showing rapid intensification beginning within 12 hours. Dr. Restrepo in Miami, running enhanced thermal analysis. Your predictions appear to be materializing. Her mother in Praga. Darling, satellite thermal imaging confirms entrainment process beginning. How can I help? At the National Weather Center in Colorado, the morning shift was beginning with the same casual confidence that had marked the previous day. Dr. Webb arrived at 6 a.m. to find the overnight forecasters preparing to hand off a perfectly routine weather situation. Minor tropical depression in the Gulf, expected to weaken before landfall. No watches or warnings needed. Another quiet day in paradise. Brad Morrison strolled in 30 minutes later, coffee in hand, already planning his weekend fishing trip to the Colorado Rockies. He checked the overnight reports with satisfaction. Everything exactly as he'd predicted during yesterday's dramatic staff meeting. The Maya situation had been handled properly, institutional wisdom had prevailed, and the weather was cooperating beautifully. "Morning, Brad," called Jennifer Chun from her workstation. "Looks like your forecast was spot on. Minor tropical depression formed overnight, but nothing concerning. Should weaken over the next 48 hours. Brad nodded with professional satisfaction. Just like the models predicted. Sometimes the simple explanation is the right explanation. But at 7:23 a.m., Dr. Hensley's phone rang with a call that would haunt her for the rest of her life. "Dr. Hensley, this is Dr. James Restrepo at the National Hurricane Center. I need to ask you about Maya Volkov." Patricia stepped outside the building to take the call privately. "Jim, I can't really discuss personnel matters." Maya was suspended. "Yesterday for Patricia, forget the politics for a minute. Maya sent me thermal analysis yesterday that showed potential for explosive storm development in the Gulf. I dismissed it initially, but our overnight satellite data is showing patterns that match her predictions with frightening accuracy." Dr. Hensley felt her chest tighten. "What kind of patterns?" "The tropical depression that formed early this morning is sitting over water temperatures that are nearly 4 degrees above normal. Upper-level wind shear is decreasing exactly as Maya predicted. And Patricia, we're detecting thermal entrainment. Signatures that suggest this system could intensify far more rapidly than our models indicate." Through the building's windows, Dr. Hensley could see her colleagues beginning their daily routines, confident in their forecasts, trusting their models, believing the institutional wisdom that had shaped their entire careers. "Jim, what are you saying exactly?" "I'm saying that Maya Volkov may have been the only person in American meteorology who correctly identified the potential for catastrophic storm development. And if she's right about the intensification rate, we have less than 18 hours before this minor depression becomes a major hurricane. Dr. Hensley closed her eyes, feeling the weight of professional responsibility crushing down on her like atmospheric pressure. Jim, yesterday Dr. Webb made it clear that entertaining Maya's theories was undermining institutional credibility. The entire senior staff agreed that her analysis was amateur speculation. Patricia, amateur speculation doesn't produce accurate storm formation predictions 12 hours in advance. Whatever Maya was trained to see, she's seeing something our conventional models are missing. Inside the weather center, Brad Morrison was reviewing the morning reports with growing satisfaction. The tropical depression remained weak and disorganized, exactly as conventional wisdom suggested it should. He began drafting a memo about the importance of trusting proven forecasting methods, rather than dramatic predictions from inexperienced personnel. But 900 miles to the southeast, Hurricane Cassandra was undergoing changes that would soon make every meteorologist in America wish they'd paid more attention to the girl with the European training. Water temperatures at the storm's core had risen to 87.1 degrees. Wind shear measurements showed the atmospheric suppression system dissolving ahead of schedule. And deep beneath the storm's innocent-looking cloud cover, thermal entrainment was beginning, the feedback loop process that would transform a minor weather disturbance into a monster that would rewrite hurricane history. Maya watched the development in real time, her multiple screens showing data that told a story of impending catastrophe. Every measurement confirmed her worst predictions. Every atmospheric indicator pointed toward explosive intensification beginning within hours, not days. She picked up her phone and called Dr. Hensley directly. "Dr. Hensley, it's Maya. I know I'm supposed to stay quiet, but you need to see what's happening right now." Maya, Dr. Webb was very clear about unauthorized contact. "Dr. Hensley, thermal entrainment began 47 minutes ago. The storm is about to intensify beyond anything your models can predict. In 6 hours, that minor tropical depression is going to be a Category 3 hurricane. In 12 hours, it will be Category 5. And in 18 hours, it's going to make landfall near New Orleans with winds exceeding 175 miles per hour. Through her office window, Dr. Hensley could see Brad Morrison at his workstation, confidently updating forecasts that showed continued minimal threat from the Gulf storm. "Maya, if you're wrong about this, if I'm wrong, I'll spend the rest of my life apologizing. But Dr. Hensley, if I'm right and nobody listens, 500,000 people are going to die tonight because institutional pride was more important than atmospheric truth." Dr. Hensley realized she was standing at the edge of a professional cliff. Jump toward Maya's warnings and risk destroying her career on the word of a suspended intern. Stay with institutional safety and risk. What exactly? As she struggled with the decision, Maya's voice carried across the phone line with quiet desperation. "Dr. Hensley, Lorenzo killed 47 people because my mother trusted consensus over evidence. How many people are you willing to let die to protect institutional harmony?" The question hung in the Colorado morning air like the smell of distant wildfire, and Dr. Hensley realized that some decisions define not just careers, but the measure of human souls. By 10 a.m., Hurricane Cassandra had already begun proving Maya right in ways that made conventional meteorology look like medieval astrology. The storm's central pressure had dropped from 1,005 to 997 millibars. In just 3 hours, a rate of intensification that shattered every prediction model the National Hurricane Center possessed. Surface winds had increased from 35 to 55 miles per hour, officially upgrading the system from tropical depression to tropical storm status 6 hours ahead of the most aggressive forecasts. But what terrified Maya most was that the intensification was accelerating. She sat in her apartment, now functioning as an unofficial emergency coordination center, with direct satellite feeds showing thermal patterns that looked like atmospheric cancer spreading through the Gulf of Mexico. The entrainment process she'd identified was creating a feedback loop where rising sea temperatures fueled stronger winds, which in turn churned up more heat from the ocean's depths, which fed even more energy into the storm's core. Her phone hadn't stopped ringing. Dr. Mueller from Hamburg was now coordinating with 3 European emergency management agencies. Dr. Restrepo at the National Hurricane Center had quietly begun running enhanced models that confirmed Maya's timeline with shocking precision. And most urgently, emergency officials in Louisiana were starting to ask questions about evacuation timing based on rapidly changing conditions. At the National Weather Center, the morning routine was beginning to crack under the weight of atmospheric reality. Dr. Webb stared at his computer screen in growing disbelief. The overnight tropical depression that was supposed to weaken was instead strengthening at a rate that made no meteorological sense. His carefully crafted institutional confidence was evaporating faster than Gulf water under Category 5 winds. "Brad, can you explain why this storm is intensifying when every model predicted weakening?" Webb's voice carried the edge of a man watching. His professional reputation dissolved in real-time. Brad Morrison stood behind his workstation, frantically refreshing data feeds that kept showing impossible readings. "Marcus, this has to be some kind of instrumentation error. Storms don't intensify this rapidly without warning. Our models would have detected the preconditions for rapid development." But even as he spoke, Brad knew his words sounded hollow. 3 different satellite systems were confirming the same impossible measurements. Water temperatures that defied seasonal norms. Wind shear patterns that contradicted fundamental atmospheric principles. Pressure readings that suggested explosive development was just beginning. Dr. Hensley entered the forecasting floor, carrying printouts of Maya's analysis from the night before, her hands shaking with the weight of prophetic accuracy. "Marcus, I need to show you something. Maya's predictions from yesterday match what's happening right now with frightening precision." Webb's face reddened with institutional fury. "Patricia, we are not going to legitimize amateur hour forecasting just because coincidence makes it look accurate. This is exactly the kind of thinking that undermines scientific credibility." But across the room, Jennifer Chun was staring at her computer screen with the expression of someone watching their worldview collapse in real time. "Marcus, you need to see this. The storm's central pressure just dropped another 8 millibars in the last hour. That's not possible according to any model we use." Brad rushed to his own terminal, pulling up satellite imagery that showed Hurricane Cassandra transforming from a disorganized swirl into a tightly wound spiral of atmospheric fury. The storm's eye was beginning to clear, wind speeds were approaching. Hurricane strength, and the thermal signature underneath suggested unlimited fuel for continued intensification. "This is impossible," Brad muttered, but his voice lacked conviction. "Storms don't just explode like this." Dr. Hensley laid Maya's analysis on Webb's desk with quiet determination. "Marcus, Maya predicted rapid intensification beginning at 8 a.m. Gulf time. She predicted thermal entrainment, creating unlimited development potential. And she predicted the storm would reach Category 5 intensity before midnight tonight." Webb stared at the papers like they contained black magic rather than atmospheric science. "Patricia, even if this girl somehow correctly identified development potential, that doesn't change the fact that she violated protocol, undermined institutional authority." And his phone rang with a call that would change everything. "Dr. Webb? This is Director Harrison from the National Hurricane Center. We need to discuss Maya Volkov immediately." The entire forecasting floor fell silent as Webb took the call on speakerphone, institutional protocol crumbling under the weight of atmospheric emergency. "Director Harrison, Maya was suspended yesterday for questioning established forecasts." "I can't see how, Marcus. Maya's thermal analysis from yesterday predicted the exact development pattern we're seeing right now. Her timeline shows this storm reaching Category 5 intensity by midnight, with landfall near New Orleans tomorrow evening. Our enhanced models are now confirming her projections with 97% accuracy. The silence in the room was deafening. Brad Morrison's face had gone pale as office paper. Dr. Hensley felt vindicated and terrified in equal measure. And Dr. Webb realized his institutional authority was evaporating faster than morning dew under nuclear heat. Director Harrison, what exactly are you suggesting? I'm suggesting that Maya Volkov has demonstrated predictive capabilities that exceed anything in conventional American meteorology. And I'm requesting immediate authorization to coordinate with her analysis as Hurricane Cassandra develops into what may be the most dangerous storm in modern history. Webb looked around the room at his staff, seeing his own professional mortality reflected in their shocked expressions. The girl they'd dismissed as an amateur had correctly predicted atmospheric developments that their billion-dollar computer systems had missed entirely. Where is Maya now? Dr. Hensley spoke up quietly. She's been monitoring the storm from her apartment, coordinating with international meteorologists and providing real-time analysis to anyone who will listen. Get her on the line, now. As Dr. Hensley dialed Maya's number, Hurricane Cassandra continued its impossible transformation in the Gulf of Mexico. Wind speeds had reached 78 miles per hour, officially making it a Category 1 hurricane 6 hours ahead of even Maya's most aggressive timeline. Central pressure was dropping so rapidly that atmospheric physicists were questioning fundamental laws of meteorological development. Maya answered on the first ring. Dr. Hensley, thank God. Are you ready to start evacuating the Gulf Coast? Her words cut through the Colorado morning like a scythe, and everyone in the room realized that the girl with the attitude problem was about to become the most important meteorologist in America, because Hurricane Cassandra was just getting started, and Maya Volkov was the only person who truly understood what was coming next. Maya, this is Director Harrison from the National Hurricane Center. I'm putting you on conference call with emergency coordinators from Louisiana, Mississippi, Alabama, and Florida. They need to hear directly from you what we're facing. Maya's voice was steady, professional, carrying none of the teenage uncertainty her colleagues had expected. Director Harrison, thank you. Gentlemen, Hurricane Cassandra is currently undergoing explosive intensification through a process called thermal entrainment. Based on real-time satellite thermal analysis, you have approximately 8 hours to complete evacuations for everyone within 50 miles of the Louisiana coast. A gruff voice interrupted from Louisiana Emergency Management. Miss, our current forecasts show a Category 1 storm making landfall late tomorrow. Are you suggesting we evacuate 500,000 people based on, sir? In 3 hours, Cassandra will be Category 3. In 6 hours, Category 4. By midnight tonight, you'll be looking at sustained winds exceeding 175 miles per hour with storm surge, potentially reaching 30 feet above normal high tide. The silence on the conference line was deafening. Maya continued, her training taking over completely. The thermal entrainment process means traditional intensity forecasting is useless. This storm is feeding on Gulf water temperatures that are 4 degrees above historical norms. Every hour you delay evacuation orders, you're condemning thousands of people to death. Dr. Webb listened in stunned silence as the suspended intern he'd dismissed yesterday took command of the most critical meteorological emergency in recent American history. Maya's voice carried authority that transcended age, experience, or institutional hierarchy, the quiet certainty of someone who'd seen atmospheric prophecy written in thermal gradients and wind patterns. Maya, Director Harrison interjected, can you walk us through your evacuation timeline? What specific areas need immediate attention? Without hesitation, Maya began coordinating the largest emergency response in Gulf Coast history. New Orleans needs to begin mandatory evacuation immediately. The storm surge models I'm running show potential for overtopping the levee system with catastrophic flooding throughout the city. Estimated evacuation time needed, 12 hours minimum. She pulled up real-time traffic analysis, population density, maps, and evacuation route capacity calculations that she'd been preparing since 3 a.m. Mississippi coastal counties need to evacuate everyone within 20 miles of the shoreline. Alabama should prepare for Category 4 conditions along the entire coast. Florida Panhandle needs to activate emergency shelters for storm surge refugees. From Louisiana and Mississippi. Louisiana emergency management interrupted. Ms. Volkov, you're talking about evacuating nearly 500,000 people based on weather predictions that contradict every official forecast. The political and economic implications. Maya's voice cut through the bureaucratic hesitation like Arctic wind. Sir, 47 people died in the Azores because officials trusted conventional forecasts over thermal analysis. I will not let that happen here. She began transmitting real-time satellite data to emergency coordinators, showing them atmospheric developments that made conventional hurricane forecasting look primitive. Look at thermal image 347 Delta. See how the storm's core temperature has increased 6 degrees in the last hour? That's thermal entrainment accelerating beyond any historical precedent. Look at wind shear measurements from satellite array Bravo 9. The atmospheric cap that normally prevents explosive intensification has completely dissolved. Emergency officials across 4 states watched their computer screens fill with data that rewrote everything they thought they knew about hurricane development. Maya continued her atmospheric briefing with precision that stunned professional emergency managers. Storm surge modeling shows potential for 28-foot surge heights in Plaquemines Parish. Wind field analysis indicates hurricane-force winds extending 120 miles from the storm center. And based on forward speed calculations, you have exactly 7 hours and 33 minutes before conditions become unsurvivable for anyone still on the coast. Director Harrison's voice carried new respect. Maya, we're implementing your evacuation timeline immediately. What else do you need to coordinate this response? I need real-time communication with every emergency management office from Texas to Florida. I need direct access to European satellite thermal imaging. And I need people to stop treating this like normal hurricane response. Within minutes, Maya's apartment had become the unofficial command center for the largest evacuation in American history. Her phone buzzed with calls from governors, emergency coordinators, and military logistics officers. Her computer screens displayed evacuation routes, traffic patterns, and shelter capacity across half the southeastern United States. At the National Weather Center, Dr. Webb watched in amazement as the teenager he'd suspended for attitude problems orchestrated emergency response with skill that exceeded most veteran disaster coordinators. Marcus, Dr. Hensley said quietly, maybe we should ask how we can help. Webb nodded, his institutional pride finally crumbling under the weight of atmospheric reality. Maya, this is Dr. Webb. What can the National Weather Center do to support your coordination efforts? Maya's response was immediate and precise. Dr. Webb, I need your computer modeling capacity to run evacuation traffic analysis for Interstate 10, Interstate 65, and Highway 90. I need your telecommunication systems to coordinate with state emergency management agencies, and I need everyone to understand that normal hurricane protocols don't apply to thermal entrainment systems. For the next 4 hours, Maya directed emergency response efforts across multiple states with the kind of command authority that typically required decades of experience. She coordinated military transport for hospital evacuations, optimized traffic flow for maximum evacuation efficiency, and provided real-time storm intensity updates that kept emergency officials ahead of the atmospheric curve. By 2 p.m., Hurricane Cassandra had reached Category 4 intensity, exactly as Maya had predicted. Winds exceeded 145 miles per hour, central pressure had dropped to 926 millibars, and satellite imagery showed a storm so perfectly organized it looked like a textbook illustration of hurricane structure. But Maya wasn't watching the storm's development. With satisfaction, she was watching evacuation progress with growing urgency. Louisiana Emergency Management. I'm showing 340,000 people successfully evacuated, but traffic analysis indicates another 160,000 still in the mandatory evacuation zone. At current pace, you'll have approximately 80,000 people still in harm's way when storm surge begins. The response was grim. Maya, we're moving people as fast as humanly possible. But 500,000 people can't disappear in 8 hours. Maya stared at her computer screens, seeing traffic patterns, population densities, and storm projections that painted a picture of unavoidable tragedy. Unless something changed dramatically in the next 4 hours, tens of thousands of people were going to die because logistics couldn't match atmospheric fury. That's when Maya Volkov made the decision that would transform her from suspended intern to legend. Director Harrison, I'm going to need a helicopter. The Louisiana National Guard helicopter cut through increasingly violent air currents as Maya directed the pilot toward the eye wall of Hurricane Cassandra, now a Category 5 monster with winds exceeding 180 miles per hour. From 1,000 feet above the Gulf, the storm looked like a living creature, a massive spiral of destruction that covered an area larger than most states. Ma'am, we're approaching the outer bands. The pilot's voice crackled through Maya's headset. Conditions are going to get rough fast. Maya stared at the meteorological instruments she'd convinced emergency officials to install in the helicopter, watching real-time atmospheric data that no ground-based system could provide. She needed to get inside the storm structure to understand exactly how the thermal entrainment process was affecting its forward speed and intensity, information that could save thousands of lives during the final evacuation hours. Take us to 500 feet above the storm surge line, Maya commanded, her voice carrying authority that made seasoned military pilots follow orders from a 19-year-old meteorologist. I need direct measurements of the thermal gradient at the storm's leading edge. Below them, the Gulf of Mexico had transformed into a cauldron of atmospheric fury. Waves reached heights of 40 feet, driven by winds that could turn steel into projectiles. The storm surge was already beginning to push inland, a wall of water that would soon make the coastal areas uninhabitable for anyone who hadn't evacuated. Maya's instruments detected thermal signatures that confirmed her worst fears. The entrainment process wasn't just maintaining the storm's intensity, it was still accelerating it. Hurricane Cassandra was becoming stronger as it approached land, defying every principle of conventional hurricane behavior. Her satellite phone rang with an awesome code. Emergency call from the National Hurricane Center. Maya, this is Director Harrison. We're getting reports that the storm's forward speed is increasing. Our models can't explain why a Category 5 hurricane would accelerate as it approaches shallow water. Through the helicopter's reinforced windows, Maya could see the atmospheric physics playing out in real time. The thermal entrainment process she'd been tracking was creating a feedback loop that was pulling the storm forward faster than normal steering currents could account for. Director Harrison, the thermal gradient is so extreme that it's creating its own pressure differential. The storm isn't just being pushed by upper-level winds, it's being pulled forward by the temperature contrast between the Gulf and the cooler landmass. She read data from her instruments with clinical precision, even as the helicopter shook violently in the storm's outer bands. Current forward speed is 23 miles per hour and increasing. Based on thermal analysis, landfall will occur 4 hours earlier than projected. the evacuation timeline just collapsed. The implications hit emergency coordinators like physical blows. They'd been moving people based on an estimated landfall time of 11 p.m. If Maya was right, the storm would reach the coast by 7 p.m., catching thousands of evacuees still on the highways. Maya, Louisiana Emergency Management's voice was tight. With desperation, we've got 50,000 people stuck in evacuation traffic on Highway 90. If the storm makes landfall 4 hours early, they'll be trapped in their cars when 30-foot storm surge hits the highway, Maya finished. We need to reroute everyone immediately to high-ground shelter locations. From her airborne position, Maya could see something that no ground-based meteorologist had access to: the storm's complete three-dimensional structure. And what she saw made her realize that Hurricane Cassandra was about to do something that would rewrite atmospheric science textbooks. Director Harrison, I need you to patch me through to every emergency coordinator in the Gulf region. What I'm seeing requires immediate action. Within minutes, Maya's voice was broadcasting to emergency officials across 4 states from inside the most dangerous hurricane in modern history. This is Maya Volkov reporting from inside Hurricane Cassandra's eye wall. The thermal entrainment process has created a storm structure unlike anything in recorded history. The eye wall is contracting while maintaining Category 5 intensity, which means wind speeds at the center are approaching 200 miles per hour. Through satellite communications, her voice reached evacuation coordinators, military logistics officers, and emergency shelter managers who were struggling to process evacuation data that kept changing faster than human response systems could adapt. More critically, the storm surge calculations need immediate revision. Thermal entrainment is creating pressure differentials that will drive surge heights to 40 feet above normal high tide. Every coastal evacuation shelter below 30 feet elevation needs to be abandoned immediately. Emergency officials across the Gulf region stared at their computer screens in shock as Maya's real-time atmospheric analysis overturned every assumption they'd been using for evacuation planning. Maya, Director Harrison's voice carried the weight of impossible decisions. You're describing conditions that exceed our emergency response capabilities. We can't evacuate another 200,000 people in 4 hours. From 500 feet above the storm surge, watching Hurricane Cassandra's eye wall approach the Louisiana coast with unprecedented fury, Maya made the calculation that would define the rest of her life. Director Harrison, we can't save everyone, but we can save 450,000 people if we redirect all remaining evacuation traffic to the highest elevation shelters within 50 miles of the coast. I'm transmitting optimized routing algorithms now. Her voice remained steady even as the helicopter shook violently in wind shear that should have been impossible to survive. Emergency coordinators, the next 4 hours will determine whether this becomes the deadliest hurricane in American history or the greatest evacuation success story ever recorded. Maya looked down at the Gulf waters, now churning with thermal energy that had created the perfect storm she'd been tracking since the previous day. Below her, Hurricane Cassandra continued its impossible evolution, powered by atmospheric processes that only she had been trained to recognize. This is Maya Volkov, coordinating Hurricane Cassandra response from inside the storm. Thermal entrainment analysis suggests we have exactly 3 hours and 47 minutes before Category 5 landfall. Every minute we delay costs lives. As her voice broadcast across the emergency networks, Maya realized that the girl who'd been suspended for attitude problems was now the only person standing between Hurricane Cassandra and the greatest natural disaster in American history, and the storm was still getting stronger. Hurricane Cassandra made landfall at 6:47 p.m. Central Time with winds of 195 miles per hour, the strongest hurricane ever recorded at the moment of United States landfall. The storm surge reached 43 feet above normal high tide, exactly. as Maya had predicted from inside the eye wall 4 hours earlier, but the highways were empty. In the National Weather Center's emergency command room, Dr. Marcus Webb stared at evacuation reports that should have been impossible. 497,000 people successfully evacuated from the impact zone. Traffic management algorithms that had moved 500,000 vehicles in 12 hours. Emergency shelter coordination that had processed the largest internal migration in American history. Without a single logistical failure. All coordinated by a 19-year-old girl he'd suspended for having an attitude problem. Marcus, Director Harrison's voice came through the conference line with a mixture of awe and professional humility. Preliminary reports show fewer than 3,000 people remaining in the mandatory evacuation zone. Maya's routing algorithms and real-time coordination saved approximately 494,000 lives. Dr. Webb looked around the room at his senior staff, seeing his own professional mortality reflected in their shocked faces. Brad Morrison sat slumped in his chair, staring at satellite imagery that showed a storm so powerful it had rewritten fundamental assumptions about hurricane physics. Jennifer Chun was quietly reviewing Maya's original analysis from 3 days ago, her face pale with the recognition of how catastrophically wrong they'd been. The phone rang with an emergency call from the White House Situation Room. Dr. Webb, this is the President's science advisor. We need immediate confirmation of Maya Volkov's credentials and authority. She's been coordinating federal emergency response for the past 6 hours, and we need to understand exactly who we're taking orders from. Webb felt his career dissolving in real time. Sir, Maya is was a suspended intern who was dismissed for questioning established forecasting protocols. The silence on the line was deafening. Dr. Webb, are you telling me that the person who predicted and coordinated response to the most dangerous hurricane in American history was suspended from your organization for asking too many questions? Before Webb could answer, Brad Morrison's phone buzzed with a message that made his face go white as paper. He held up the screen for everyone to see. A text from the National Academy of Sciences requesting emergency consultation with Dr. Elena Volkova's daughter regarding revolutionary advances in thermal entrainment hurricane prediction. Marcus. Brad's voice was barely a whisper. Maya's mother is Dr. Elena Volkova. She's one of the most respected severe weather researchers in the world. Maya isn't just some intern, she's atmospheric royalty who was trained from childhood by European storm prediction experts. Dr. Hensley, who had spent the last 6 hours coordinating with Maya's emergency response team, finally spoke up with quiet fury. Marcus, I tried to tell you yesterday that Maya's analysis deserved serious consideration. You dismissed her as an amateur while she was literally predicting the future of American meteorology. Webb stared at the evacuation reports, the storm tracking data, and the coordination logs that painted a picture of predictive genius operating at levels that exceeded anything in conventional American weather forecasting. The girl they'd treated as a troublemaker had demonstrated capabilities that made their institutional expertise look primitive. Get Maya on the line, Webb said quietly, his voice carrying the weight of professional humiliation. Maya's voice came through the emergency communication system with the same calm authority she'd maintained throughout the crisis. Dr. Webb, this is Maya. I'm currently coordinating final evacuation verification from the Louisiana Emergency Operations Center. Maya, the National Weather Center owes you an apology that no words can adequately express. Dr. Webb, apologies can wait. Right now I need confirmation that all coastal hospitals have been evacuated and that emergency shelters are prepared for Category 5 impact. Even in the moment of her greatest vindication, Maya remained focused on saving lives rather than collecting recognition. Webb realized he was listening to someone whose character exceeded her meteorological genius. Maya, consider whatever authority you need officially granted. The National Weather Center is at your complete disposal. Director Harrison's voice joined the conversation. Maya, this is Director Harrison. On behalf of the National Hurricane Center, I'm offering you immediate appointment as Senior Atmospheric Analyst with full research autonomy and budget authorization for Thermal Entrainment Hurricane Prediction Program. But Maya's response reflected the same quiet strength that had characterized her throughout the crisis. Director Harrison, I appreciate the offer, but right now Hurricane Cassandra is making landfall and we have 3,000 people still in harm's way. Professional appointments can wait until everyone is safe. Through the communication system, emergency. Coordinators across 4 states could hear Maya continuing her real-time storm coordination, even as offers of career advancement poured in from every major meteorological institution in America. Louisiana Emergency Management. I'm showing successful evacuation completion for sectors 7 through 23. Mississippi Emergency Coordination. Your coastal hospitals report full evacuation with patients successfully transferred to inland facilities. Alabama Emergency Response. Storm surge heights are tracking exactly as predicted, 43 feet above normal high tide. Dr. Webb listened in amazement as Maya provided real-time hurricane analysis that exceeded anything his senior staff could produce, all while coordinating the largest emergency response in American history. Brad Morrison, his arrogance finally shattered completely, stood up and walked to the conference phone. Maya, this is Brad Morrison. I owe you a personal apology. Everything you predicted came true while everything I believed was wrong. I'm sorry. Maya's response was gracious but firm. Mr. Morrison, Lorenzo killed 47 people because meteorologists chose pride over evidence. Today we saved 494,000 people because we chose atmospheric truth over institutional comfort. That's the only apology the atmosphere requires. As Hurricane Cassandra continued its devastating landfall, emergency reports confirmed what Maya's predictions had made possible: the greatest evacuation success in American history. Empty highways where storm surge reached 40 feet. Abandoned coastal areas where winds exceeded 190 miles per hour. Emergency shelters that had processed 500,000 evacuees without losing a single life to logistics failures. Webb realized he was witnessing the end of one era of American meteorology and the beginning of another. An era where atmospheric truth mattered more than institutional hierarchy, where European thermal analysis would reshape American storm prediction, and where a quiet girl with an attitude problem had become the most important meteorologist of her generation. All while Hurricane Cassandra proved that sometimes the deadliest storms can be survived if someone has the courage to see what's coming and the wisdom to act on atmospheric truth rather than conventional comfort. 72 hours after Hurricane Cassandra's landfall, the scope of Maya's achievement became clear in ways that redefined American emergency management forever. Final evacuation. Reports showed 497,847 people successfully moved from the impact zone, the largest pre-storm evacuation in United States history. Property damage exceeded $200 billion, but human casualties numbered fewer than 50, most from people who had refused evacuation orders. Maya's thermal entrainment predictions and real-time coordination had prevented what every computer model suggested should have been the deadliest natural disaster in American history. The President of the United States called Maya personally to offer her the Presidential Medal of Freedom. The director of FEMA requested her immediate consultation on national disaster preparedness protocols. The European Center for Medium-Range Weather Forecasts invited her to lead a new international severe weather prediction initiative. Maya declined them all. Instead, she sat in a borrowed office at the Louisiana Emergency Operations Center, writing after-action reports and coordinating recovery efforts for the 500,000 evacuees who needed to return home safely. Her focus remained on practical atmospheric service rather than public recognition. Maya, Director Harrison entered the office carrying a folder thick with job offers from every major meteorological institution in the world. "We need to discuss your future. The National Hurricane Center is prepared to offer you any position you want, with complete research autonomy and unlimited budget for thermal entrainment studies." Maya looked up from her computer, where she was analyzing atmospheric conditions for the next week to ensure safe recovery operations. "Director Harrison, I appreciate the offers, but I need to ask you something first. How many other meteorologists are trained in thermal entrainment detection, including you? 1. How many American institutions are equipped to monitor the atmospheric indicators that predict explosive intensification? None currently. Maya nodded, understanding the scope of the problem she'd inherited. "Director Harrison, individual career advancement isn't going to prevent the next Hurricane Cassandra. We need systematic changes in American meteorological education, European-style thermal monitoring networks, and institutional cultures that value atmospheric truth over bureaucratic comfort." 3 days later, Maya stood before a joint congressional committee investigating the meteorological failures that had nearly led to unprecedented disaster. The hearing room was packed with emergency management officials, meteorologists, and reporters trying to understand how a suspended intern had become America's most important weather predictor. "Ms. Volkov," the committee chairman began, "can you explain how you were able to predict Hurricane Cassandra's development when the entire National Weather Service missed it?" Maya's response was characteristically direct. "Congressman, I wasn't smarter than the National Weather Service. I was trained differently. European meteorological education emphasizes thermal analysis and rapid intensification detection in ways that American institutions historically haven't." She pulled up satellite imagery showing the atmospheric conditions that had preceded Cassandra's development. The thermal signatures were visible 72 hours in advance to anyone trained to recognize them. The problem wasn't detection capability. It was institutional willingness to consider analysis that contradicted conventional models. Senator Patricia Williams leaned forward. "Ms. Volkov, are you suggesting that American meteorological training is fundamentally inadequate?" "I'm suggesting that atmospheric science is evolving faster than institutional adaptation. Climate change is creating storm development patterns that require new detection methods and international cooperation. Hurricane Cassandra won't be the last thermal entrainment system to threaten American coastlines." Maya's testimony continued for 6 hours, providing technical recommendations that would reshape American weather forecasting for decades. Real-time thermal monitoring networks, international data sharing agreements, training programs in rapid intensification detection, institutional protocols that valued predictive accuracy over bureaucratic hierarchy. But the most significant change came in a quiet conversation after the hearing. Dr. Marcus Webb approached Maya in the Capitol hallway, his face carrying the weight of professional humility she'd never seen from him before. "Maya, I've submitted my resignation as chief meteorologist at the National Weather Center. I'm recommending you as my replacement." Maya studied his face, seeing genuine respect rather than institutional obligation. "Dr. Webb, I appreciate the gesture, but I'm 19 years old. I don't have the administrative experience to run a major weather center." "Maya, you coordinated emergency response for 500,000 people while hanging from a helicopter in Category 5 winds. Administrative experience is learnable. Atmospheric genius isn't." Maya's response reflected the quiet wisdom that had shaped her throughout the crisis. "Dr. Webb, I don't want to run existing institutions. I want to build new ones that are designed from the ground up to detect what conventional systems miss." 6 months later, Maya opened the International Severe Weather Prediction Center in New Orleans, a research facility that combined European thermal analysis techniques with American emergency coordination capabilities. The center was funded jointly by NASA, NOAA, and the European Space Agency. With Maya as its first director of atmospheric research, her staff included meteorologists from 12 countries, emergency coordinators with experience in mass evacuation, logistics and communication specialists trained in real-time crisis coordination. But most importantly, it included Brad Morrison, who had requested transfer specifically to learn thermal entrainment detection from the person who had revolutionized his understanding of atmospheric science. Maya, Brad said during the center's opening ceremony, I spent 20 years believing that American meteorology was the gold standard for storm prediction. Hurricane Cassandra taught me that atmospheric truth doesn't care about national boundaries or institutional pride. Maya nodded, watching real-time satellite feeds that showed perfect weather conditions across the Atlantic basin. Brad, the atmosphere, speaks the same language everywhere. We just need to learn to listen in ways that transcend conventional comfort. The center's mission statement, written in Maya's careful hand, hung in the main operations room. Atmospheric truth serves no institution and respects no hierarchy. Our purpose is to hear what the atmosphere whispers before it screams, and to ensure that human preparedness matches atmospheric reality. Within its first year, the center had detected and coordinated response to 3 rapid intensification events that conventional American models had missed entirely, saving an estimated 200,000 lives through improved evacuation timing. But Maya's greatest satisfaction came from quieter victories. Young meteorologists learning to recognize thermal signatures that could prevent future disasters, international cooperation that transcended political boundaries, and institutional cultures that valued predictive accuracy over bureaucratic convenience. The girl who had been grounded for her attitude had built a new order, where atmospheric truth mattered more than institutional hierarchy, and where the key next Hurricane Cassandra would find humanity prepared rather than surprised. 5 years after Hurricane Cassandra, Maya Volkov stood on the observation deck of the International Severe Weather Prediction Center, watching storm clouds gather over the Gulf of Mexico with the practiced eye of someone who had learned to read atmospheric poetry written in pressure gradients and thermal signatures. At 24, she had been awarded the World Meteorological Organization's highest honor, featured on the covers of Time magazine and Scientific American, and credited with saving over 800,000 lives through improved hurricane prediction methods. Universities across 3 continents offered her endowed professorships. Governments requested her consultation on climate adaptation strategies. Publishers competed for rights to her atmospheric research. Maya had quietly declined them all. Instead, she remained focused on the work that mattered, training the next generation of meteorologists to see patterns that conventional models missed, coordinating international atmospheric monitoring networks, and ensuring that thermal entrainment detection became standard practice rather than revolutionary innovation. Her office walls displayed not awards or honors, but photographs that told the real story of her impact. Images of empty highways that would have been packed with evacuees if conventional forecasting had prevailed. Pictures of coastal communities rebuilt with new understanding of storm surge potential. Group photos of international meteorological teams trained in rapid intensification detection, and prominently displayed a small framed photograph of 47 white crosses on a windswept island in the Azores, with a handwritten note from her mother, Elena. You honored their memory by preventing others from joining them. Love, Mama. Dr. Patricia Hensley, now Maya's deputy director, entered the office carrying morning reports from monitoring stations across the Atlantic basin. Maya, the European Center is picking up thermal anomalies east of the Cape Verde Islands. Early indicators suggest potential for rapid development. Maya smiled, remembering a time when such warnings would have been dismissed as amateur speculation by institutional authorities who confused Bureaucratic comfort with atmospheric truth. Patricia, let's run full thermal analysis and coordinate. With emergency management offices from the Caribbean to the Carolinas, no more Hurricane Lorenzos. No more Hurricane Cassandras. The Prediction Center's main operations room hummed with the quiet efficiency of international cooperation. Meteorologists from Germany analyzed satellite thermal imaging. Emergency coordinators from Florida refined evacuation algorithms. Communication specialists from the Netherlands tested real-time warning systems. And at the center of it all, Maya moved with the same understated authority she'd carried since that morning when a suspicious teenager had been suspended for asking uncomfortable questions. Her daily routine remained deliberately modest. She lived in a small apartment near the center, drove a 10-year-old Honda Civic, and spent her evenings reading atmospheric research papers rather than attending the social events that her celebrity status could have provided. The girl who had transformed meteorological science remained fundamentally unchanged by the recognition her achievements had earned, but her impact rippled through institutions worldwide. American meteorological education now required coursework in thermal entrainment. Detection. European atmospheric monitoring networks shared real-time data with their American counterparts. Emergency management protocols had been rewritten to accommodate rapid intensification scenarios that previously existed only in Maya's calculations. Dr. Marcus Webb, who had taken early retirement after Hurricane Cassandra, visited the center. Occasionally to observe the fundamental changes Maya had brought to meteorological practice. During his last visit, he'd pulled Maya aside for a conversation that neither would forget. "Maya, I need you to know something. When I suspended you for questioning established forecasts, I genuinely believed I was protecting scientific integrity. I was wrong about everything, the science, the institutional priorities, and most importantly, about you." Maya's response had been characteristically gracious. "Dr. Webb, institutional resistance to new ideas isn't personal failure, it's human nature. The important thing is that atmospheric truth eventually prevailed over bureaucratic comfort." As Maya watched the afternoon satellite feeds, her phone buzzed with a message from Dr. James Restrepo at the National Hurricane Center. "Maya, thermal. Signatures suggest rapid development potential in Atlantic Basin. Could you review our analysis?" She smiled, remembering when such consultation requests would have seemed impossible. The suspended intern had become the meteorologist that other meteorologists called when conventional wisdom wasn't sufficient. Maya's legacy wasn't measured in awards or recognition, but in lives saved by improved atmospheric understanding. Every empty highway during storm surge warnings. Every successful evacuation coordinated through thermal entrainment analysis. Every future Hurricane Cassandra detected early enough to prevent tragedy rather than requiring heroic response. Her mother visited from Prague twice a year, always bringing new research papers and atmospheric data from European institutions. During her last visit, Dr. Alina Volkova had stood in the same operations room where Maya now worked, watching real-time international cooperation that transcended political boundaries in service of atmospheric truth. "Maya," her mother had said, in accented English that carried decades of pride, "you took the lessons from Lorenzo's tragedy and built something that ensures such tragedies need never happen again. The atmosphere speaks the same language everywhere, you just taught the world to listen." As evening approached over the Gulf of Mexico, Maya prepared her daily atmospheric briefing for emergency management offices across the southeastern United States. The thermal analysis showed continued stable conditions, but her monitoring systems remained vigilant for the subtle signatures that could indicate rapid change. She thought about the journey from suspended intern to international meteorological authority and realized that the most important lesson had nothing to do with atmospheric science. Sometimes the greatest achievements come not from those who speak loudest or hold highest positions, but from those who have the courage to see clearly and the wisdom to act on evidence rather than institutional comfort. Maya Volkov had been grounded. For her attitude, an attitude that valued atmospheric truth over bureaucratic harmony, evidence over hierarchy, and human preparedness over institutional convenience, that same attitude had saved 500,000 lives during Hurricane Cassandra and prevented countless future tragedies through improved understanding of thermal entrainment systems. The quiet girl, who had been dismissed for asking uncomfortable questions, had become the voice that 500,000 people were grateful had refused to stay silent. And in the end, that was the only recognition that mattered. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.